Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abdullah Laden. I'm the Deputy Convener of the Kabilon Africa think tank and also a Senior Program Officer with Empowering Women for Excellence Initiative, the host of the Kabilon Africa think tank. CATS, as an acronym of the Caribbean Africa think tank, is a community of professionals and passionate Africans in the continent and in diaspora that seeks to see Africa as a continent that leads the way when it comes to human capital development, economy, business, politics, and a whole lot of other things. Africa as a continent has a lot of potentials, and you can see Africa in different parts of the world doing exceptionally great, breaking barriers, setting records, and also setting the scene when it comes to scientific, technological, or medical achievements. So what we seek to achieve in Kabilon Africa is to see how we mobilize young people, professionals, and in the corporate and academia to start advocating for policies and uh, reforms that will guide or set the map for Africa to be the continent it deserves to be. Our mission and vision at the Caribbean Africa think tank is to see that we achieved a better Africa for all of us, for our children, and for the future generations to come. And that is why we launched the Kabilon Africa think tank and the CAT Youth Country Focus Program, where we aim to train passionate young people and professionals in the area of policy advocacy, which brought about this webinar. This is a monthly webinar we've been conducting for this is the fifth edition of this webinar, and we started with the first topic, which is understanding power dynamics and mapping. And this has taught the participants how to map and understand powerful people that will influence and shape or support their advocacy. And we move to the second webinar, which is leveraging media and digital tools for effective advocacy. And then the third webinar on the topic, innovative and sustainable solutions to regional developmental challenges, featuring a breakout session from 4 regions in Africa. And then we moved also to strategic partnership and coalition building for policy influence, which was our fourth webinar, and this fifth webinar on monitoring and evaluating advocacy for policy impact. So when you look at this topic, you'll see that these topics are linked to each other. And if you are following up closely and have attended all these webinars, you will be connected directly to the topic of the conversation and how that shapes your understanding of policy and advocacy, and how that will help you in advocating for policy reforms, especially around education, health, gender equality, and a whole lot of other things. And we're doing this for youths in the African continent to understand how to lead advocacy and how to seek for reforms when it comes to area of policy and engaging with decision makers. Today we have a very important guest in the house with us that will lead the conversation in the area of M&E, and he is a senior program officer with Empowering Women for Excellence Initiative. He's a monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning officer, and he has experience when it comes to this M&E we are going to discuss today, a decade of experience in the field and working with stakeholders and implementing policies and decisions around community development. Our guest for today is Mendia and Jeremiah, and Mandy will lead us for the next 25 minutes to help us shape our understanding, learn and relearn, and unlearn what we knew or what we are about to know when it comes to monitoring and evaluation. Mendia Jama is with us today, and with me is my colleague in the background, Angela Amode, and also Uche Brown, and then the convener of the Caribbean Africa think tank, and also the founder and program director of the Empowering Women for Excellence Initiative, Sophia Ibunigalba DT. We welcome you all. Together with my colleague, we welcome you all to this webinar, and we hope you will learn great valuable knowledge today, and you will share with us your experience at the end of this session, because there will be a Q&A session, and we'll also share poll to understand or to help us evaluate what we are doing, and there will be an interactive segment and also a Q&A, as I mentioned earlier. Then we snap photographs, and then we'll call it a day. So without wasting much time, I will hand us over to Mendia Janga that will take us for the next 20 to 25 minutes on this important topic. So thank you, and over to you, Mendia.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, Good afternoon from Nigeria, and I know we have participants from other parts of Africa. I believe for some persons it's evening, so good evening as well. Um, Thank you, Ladan, for the introduction and to the reasons why we are here today. Um, as earlier stated, my my name is Mendy Jeremiah, and I work with Empowering Men for Excellence Initiative as a program person in the new department that's monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and then so today we have to take a tour to discuss and have basic understanding of what M&E does in terms of advocacy, what's the role of monitoring and evaluation in advocacy drives. And just like we all are aware that CATs are majorly about advocacy, because whatever we set out to achieve for the youth in Africa has to come through advocacy, has to come through our policies, enabling youth to thrive to achieve what ever they want to achieve. All right. So can we go to the next slide? Okay, so we'll be looking at the objectives of today. We'll look at understanding why monitoring and evaluation is critical in advocacy work. We'll also look at identifying key indicators that we need in tracking all the advocacy work we do, the results, and we'll explore the tools and frameworks for evaluating policy influence, and also review possibly a case study illustrating practical application. Next slide. So quickly, I would like us to drop some things in the chat box. Just share with me what you understand by monitoring and evaluation. What do you understand by advocacy? We could just have that coming in the next. We could give like a minute for that. Let's see your comment. What do you understand by monitoring? What do you understand by evaluating and advocacy? Just keep it coming. Okay, I see Easy says advocacy is raising awareness on an issue, monitoring is tracking something. Thank you so much. Keep it coming in. Ismail, monitoring is knowing the details of a particular thing and advocacy is implementing it. Thank you. Uh, Easy evaluating is checking whether something met the necessary goals. Yep. Thank you. I can see we have scholars here. Advocacy is the preaching and standing for change. Um, that's from Tata. Ami says monitoring and evaluation is tracking and analyzing the data that is harvested during project campaigns. Advocacy is promoting and implementing the ideas of a cause. Very true. Che Brown says monitoring is to ensure goals are met, uh, progress is tracked, and improvements are made. I think we are all professionals in this field. I can see positive responses. All responses here are correct, and there's no response that is uh, not right as far as this session is concerned. So, while responses keep coming in, we would like to proceed. Next slide. So let's look at, based on your definitions and what we have. Next slide, please. All right. So, I have definitions here for you from uh, UN Women specifically. I intentionally selected the definitions from UN Women because, again, as we are working as youth, we need to understand that there is need for whatever policy we are driving out there for inclusivity. And UN Women has actually captured uh, what monitoring and evaluation is, and to an extent the principles needed for monitoring and evaluating projects. But again, we need to also understand that monitoring and evaluation have different phases. And for today, we are looking at on advocacy. So the way and manner you go about your monitoring and evaluation for advocacy is quite different from monitoring and evaluation for say a project on sports or empowerment. So let's see. The UN Women defines monitoring as a continuous process of collecting and analyzing information to track the process of a program or project against planned results. Yeah, just as someone that earlier stated, we look at all data we've collected on an ongoing project. So you're already implementing your intervention, is already ongoing. And for our conversation today, we are looking at policies. So let's see, can someone drop a policy in his or her country that you are thinking of making a change, or you are thinking to call for action to that policy? So we could be using that policy as an example in the course of our conversation. Someone can just drop that while we continue. So we are now looking at how does monitoring help you in what you do. In advocacy, it helps you to identify the challenges early enough and also supports timely decision making for improvement. So when we are implementing advocacy interventions, monitoring comes in very handy because it helps us to identify the positives and negatives, the challenges we are encountering, or the successes we are recording, and build on them. Whereby there are challenges, we re-strategize. So while evaluation is the systemic and objective assessment of an ongoing or completed intervention, including its design, implementation, and results. So just like Chukwebuka stated, evaluation check the extent of your outcome. It summarizes that. You just check how far you've gone, what have you been able to do, are things moving as planned, and are the things intended to do, did we get them done the way we had planned for it or not? So we look at that as evaluation. It aims to determine the relevance, the effectiveness, and efficiency. So was it necessary? Was it relevant for us to carry out this campaign? Um, yes, I've seen some policy. Someone has stated, Uche said, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law, national taxation policy, national gender policy in Cameroon. So I think I'll go with Tata. So let's discuss national gender policy in Cameroon. So if we are looking at national policy, gender policy in Cameroon, as an advocacy intervention that we want to carry out, we need to look at what are we going to monitor. Is it an ongoing policy already? Is the policy already in place? And are we checking the effectiveness of the policy? That's evaluation. Do we want to know, is it efficient? Have people been tried? You know, have people been empowered? Have both men and women been empowered through the policy? Does the policy capture the empowerment? Does the policy look at does the policy look at um the welfare of everyone, or it's a selective kind of policies, is lopsided? It only pays attention to a particular gender. So we look at all this. Sorry, the slide, please. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so we'll look at that. So we'll be using the national gender policy in Cameroon as we proceed further. Next slide. So there are other terms that one needs to understand when you are doing monitoring and evaluation, such as indicators. And what are indicators? Basically, indicators are we all are conversant with the traffic lights, right? So you have your red, which says stop, your green, go, yellow, ready. So your indicators are just like the traffic lights, which is a practical example of an indicator. So what does this do to monitoring and evaluation? It tells you if what you set out to achieve is on track, which of course, if what you are planning to see that the national policy in Cameroon being institutionalized and implemented, and you look at the progress you are making so far, are lawmakers involved? What are they doing? What are the conversations around that? What are the citizens? What are their view? What are their perspective regarding the policies and all that? So it tells you if it's on the positive to what you want, you are on green, and when you are hitting the rocks, your indicators helps you to identify that you are moving in the wrong direction, or you need to re-strategize. So basically, indicators they could be both quantitative and qualitative variables that provide a simple and reliable basis for measuring achievements, reflecting the changes connected to an intervention, or helping to assess the performance of development initiatives. So I'll cite an example in Nigeria. The school feeding program, for instance, is as a result of one of the educational policies to see that it encourages children to return back to school, basically out of school children. And if you've been following, Nigeria, sadly, we are among those stopping the chart for children out of school. So the school feeding program is set aside to see that it encourage enrollment, it encourage retention and completion. So, what do you do? What do we do as youth? What do we do to ensure that the implementation process of the school feeding program is going on well? So, and um, to either advocate for its improvements or advocate for certain other things that has to do with that program. So we monitor, we look at if the um, vendors are supplying the food as requested or as planned. You look at the environment, the school environment. Do they have a cafeteria where the children will sit to eat? Um, uh, are the teachers involved? What are the parents' perspective to this? Are they all, are they children who really do not meet the school feeding program? Maybe by level of privileges, they are opportunity to come from a home that is not underserved and all that. So we look at these indicators. What is the quality of meal given to them? Are the meals meeting up with the nutritional standard, right? Because we are working with children to avoid malnutrition and all that. So these are some of the things you look at as those things that I listed are things that we call indicators, right? You are looking at these things, number of children, how many children per school, what is the ration of meal available to them. So those are indicators, and they could be both quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative, number of children which you are able to measure. Qualitative is giving feedback that the meal provided have always been carbohydrate with no other source of um, nutritional vitamins and all that. So that could serve as your qualitative indicator. So quantitative indicators, once more, is, as I mentioned earlier on, are most useful when the type of change resulting from an advocacy activity can be accurately identified. For example, if an advocacy intervention involves a letter writing campaign, then counting the number of letters written and sent by supporters is an obvious first step. So if our advocacy for a change is looking at writing letters to the different county or different ward, as the case may be in individual nation, individual country, we have to look at how many letters have we been able to submit. So that is quantitative. Yes, we've been able to submit X number of letters, or we've been able to submit Y number of letters. And then we look at to who did we submit these letters, how many traditional leaders were we able to submit those letters to, and all that. So that comes in as quantitative data, indicator, sorry. Next slide. Yes. And the qualitative indicators are more useful when there is a range of potential actions, like I said earlier on, that can be taken by advocacy targets or allies. For example, an indicator such as actions taken by members of the public following an advocacy event. So, like I mentioned with the school uh, feeding program in Nigeria. So our qualitative indicators will be looking at feedback collected, feedback received from parents as regards the school feeding program, if it has been helpful to them, what their thoughts about it, and uh, general qualitative feedback from them. So one of the indicators there could be um, well, we do not seem to like the meal they provide for our children because in as much as we do not have anything, what we give to our children are better off than what the government are giving. And then, that's more like a qualitative feedback. So for us, it's falls under our qualitative because so for example, yes, action taken by members of the public following an advocacy event is capable of capturing a variety of different changes, even if the exact nature of those changes cannot be accurately predicted beforehand. So, I mean, that's why we call it qualitative, right? You do not structure um, what comes out of it. It's beyond your own control. It's whatever you get from the general public. And so the most times this comes in form of maybe interview, and you have interview with someone and the person is just saying, um, you're only in control of asking the person what's your name, but you're not in control of how long the person is going to call his name. If it's like 7 to 8 different names he has, or he chooses to just mention one. So qualitative, it's all about that. Next slide. Okay. Okay. There's a new tax reform to take effect by January. Okay. All right. So while we are waiting for our slide to come on, have any one of us been involved in any advocacy activity before? So if you've been involved in an advocacy activity before, please just drop in the advocacy campaign or activities you've been involved in. All right. Thank you. While you do that, we are back on. As I stated earlier on, I intentionally, while preparing this simplified slide, came up with using the UN women, because what we do basically is that we are working closely in the areas of empowering women and girls in our society, and also um, for every advocacy campaign, for everything we are doing, we are looking at gender mainstreaming. We are looking at it to be very inclusive, in ensuring that we are leaving no one behind. And most times, it's best for us to use the UN uh, definitions, UN women definitions, since they champion most of these things. So key principles of M&E, according to UN Women, is that it has to be result-based management. Result-based management. So for whatever we are doing under M&E, be it for advocacy or empowerment program or for a sports program, you know, it has to be result-based. So it should focus on achieving measurable outcomes and impact. What are your intentions? What do you intend to achieve at the end of the day? Are you just carrying out um, this advocacy campaign just to be noticed in your community that you are doing something? Do you have an intention to actually change the narratives within your community? Like the national gender policy in Cameroon, what are you thinking about when it comes to Cameroon? You share with us if the policy is already in existence, or are you advocating for it to be reviewed, or are you advocating for it to be fully implemented as it ought to be? So these are the things you have to set out what you want to achieve. So for every advocacy campaign you are carrying out, your M&E, your monitoring and evaluation, one of the principles. So while you are saying you want to ensure that through this advocacy, the national policy, gender policy in Cameroon is fully implemented, that already is the principle of M&E, because now you are looking at results, the outcome of what you intend to do. Then you look at gender responsiveness. Yes. And when you are looking at the gender responsiveness, you see that so, sorry, I don't know if you heard me. My network seems to have skipped. So, yes, gender responsiveness, we look at to ensure that all what we are doing have the gender perspective to it, irrespective of one's identity, not just ending with gender, irrespective of one's identity. Is this policy going to be very inclusive? Is it going to ensure that persons living with disability are being included? Women and girls are being included. For nations who are open to um, other forms of gender, right? Because for we here, we are living within the cycle of just two sex. So what are you looking at uh, when it when you are advocating for a certain policy? Hope what you are advocating for is not excluding people from, is not at the end of the day when passed or when being implemented will end up marginalizing a particular group of persons. So that is one of the principle that you need to puts up. Then accountability, another key principle is accountability. How accountable are you? Um, you know, how accountable are you first to yourself, to what you want to achieve? And then how accountable are you to the stakeholders you are engaging with? How transparent, what are you doing in terms of your advocacy drive? You do not need to set up an advocacy campaign and then you have a hidden agenda behind it, and uh, people are not aware of what you really are doing, because this will lead to mistrust. Once there is any iota of doubt in what you are doing, it will lead to mistrust, and that will, at the end of the day, sabotage the total effort of your advocacy campaign. So, for accountability, it the rights of holders. For instance, here we are looking at women and girls. So, for any policy you are advocating for, there are persons who are involved, and those are the holders, right? Like someone shared taxation policy. So, what are the rights of the citizens who are going to be taxed? Have you considered them? Have you looked at it if this policy, when implemented, will not be uh, so hard on citizens in terms of their economic income and all that? So these are the things that we need to bear in mind, and they are identified as key principles for M&E design. So you also look at learning oriented. What you intend to learn from what you are doing? Um, it facilitates learning for future programming and policy development. So while you are carrying out your advocacy campaign on a particular policy, for instance, the national gender policy, while you are doing your campaign in it, and then you come to realization that in these policies, as you are going through it page by page and calling for it to be fully implemented and all that, you realize that probably there is a gap, and one of the gap could be that the national gender policy did not capture persons with disability and all that. It's possible for you to um pick that out and call for the development of a policy for persons with disability, or for it to be amended and it should be included in the national gender policy to have just a single policy, depending on what you want. This has to do with individuality. It has to do with your location, what is acceptable to you in your place, and all that. Then you look at participation. So in designing your M&E plan for your advocacy campaign, it has to be participatory. Meaningful engagement of stakeholders, especially women and girls, in all stages of the M&E process. So for our advocacy drive, right, you cannot be having um, an advocacy campaign that do not capture persons from all regions. So the national gender policy in Cameroon, for instance, from the basic knowledge we have about Cameroon is that you have both the Anglophone and Francophone parts of Cameroon. So and this is a national policy. It's it's your advocacy campaign participatory. The team you are building for this campaign, are they just persons from the Anglophone parts of Cameroon, or are they just persons from the Francophone parts of Cameroon? Because you have to consider this. If there is no room for participation, if it might not be intentional that you have a team that is not inclusive of the other um inclusive of the other region. But because you are setting out to achieve a policy at a national level, you have to be intentional about your team. You have to be intentional about your implementation activity, about the kind of campaigns you are carrying out, bearing in mind that these two persons have a different background and different level of understanding, especially in terms of communication, language barrier. So you have to look at these things and ensure that your advocacy drive, your advocacy design, your advocacy activities include all parties. For instance, if you're having a workshop for youth to advocate for the national policy in Cameroon, you have to ensure that there are interpreters in that workshop because you have persons from different language backgrounds so that they could all participate in the conversation. So I think basically that's the part of participation. Next slide, please. Fine. So we've had lots of definition about advocacy initially. We've heard people who said it's about awareness and all that. So yeah, awareness, and um calling for things to change and all that. Well, all those definitions are right. Advocacy basically is the process of actively supporting, promoting, or influencing a cause. Policy, I highlighted policy because we are talking about policy here, or issues to create change. So it involves raising awareness, like some of us have mentioned earlier on, engaging stakeholders. And when we say stakeholders, who are they? They are persons who are directly involved in what we want to change, right? And so if you want a standard market, you want the relocation of a market from where point A to point B, one of your key major stakeholder that you need to first consider when looking at your stakeholders will be the traders making use of the facilities. So you need to engage with them. You need to understand with them. They need to understand why do you want to move them from where they are to the other point. And you also get to understand from them why where they are probably is the best spot for them or not. So stakeholders does not just mean, and there are different layers to these stakeholders. You have high level, medium, and low. So it does not really mean that when we talk about stakeholders, it's at the very high level. But then again, in this situation to which, bringing it back to the context of our topic today, um, engaging stakeholders here for your advocacy means you are designing a national policy, a national gender policy. So you have your stakeholders at grassroots level, which will include community members that are men, women, persons with disability, for them to have basic understanding of what the national gender policy entails, what it's going to be the positive outcome of it, and what are the challenges that one might face, and all these have been discussed and all that. And then you have your high level stakeholders engagement, which of course, that's where your legislative comes in and your executive arm of government, they come in because one is going to um, pass the bill while the other is going to be responsible for the enactment. So at this level, you need to engage with your stakeholders. They need to have proper understanding. They need to tell you their own stand and all that. So when you look at that, and you also look at taking strategic actions to address problems and improve the well-being of individuals or communities. So basically, that is what advocacy is. Advocacy has to do with making the necessary change where needed, and um, involving necessary parties who are needed for that change. And in most times, they take long time to be visible, especially in terms of policies and behavioral change. So if you are advocating for um, resolving conflict situations in a community, this kind of advocacy campaigns would take longer period, you know, and if, yeah, as a matter of fact, even with the policies, the national policies and all that, and I can tell you, in Nigeria, one of the challenges we've been facing is um, you have different um, regions with different ideology and all that. So when you are working on a national policy, you have to ensure, especially the stakeholders' engagement becomes a necessity for you. So in your advocacy campaign for such things, you need to make proper arrangement, a well-structured monitoring and evaluation plan for the advocacy campaign. Because just like an example is the Child Rights Act in Nigeria. So progress have been made, and that progress has taken more than 10 years for it to be made. And as we speak, we still have about 2 to 3 different states in some parts of Africa, I know you use province, that are yet to um, sign up to that policy or that law, as the case may be. And that goes to show you that I'm sure the people or the set of civil society organizations who started the Child Rights Act campaign 10, 12 years back, uh, not all of them are still in the race, and yet we still have states who are yet to fully implement this policy. So it takes longer time, and because it takes longer time, it needs more people to be involved. We need to ensure that people are involved, people have clear understanding of what it is. Because once people do not have the clear understanding of what your advocacy campaign is about, it no matter how good your intentions are, it's going to frustrate the process for you, and it's going to take you longer time. So if you get it right at the planning stage, at the level of stakeholders engagement, and the solutions you are providing to the issues, you are able to trash it. And most times the challenge is that we sit down to feel or to assume that the solution I have to a particular problem is the final. But by the time you start engaging with people, that solution will be refined, refined, and refined, and refined until you are able to come up with a final solution that you can now use for your advocacy campaign. So yes, next slide. So why do M&E matters in advocacy? Why? Why do we think monitoring and evaluation matters more in advocacy? So, um, accountability. Number one is accountability. You know, it's very important that you are accountable to everyone involved, especially if your advocacy campaign is being sponsored. You have to be very accountable to your funders and you have to be accountable to your stakeholders. Like I've mentioned, it cannot be overemphasized. Your stakeholders are very, very important in your advocacy campaign. You have to be very much accountable to them. You cannot be advocating for a national gender policy and you are also either you or your staff members or your team members are found wanting for violating the very thing that you are advocating for. So, for instance, you have someone who is advocating against ending violence against women and girls, and the same person is the Mark Tyson in his home, beating up his wife every day and all that. And yet it's the same person who is advocating for such things. So now I don't think, do you think that person is accountable? And then if you are talking to your stakeholders about a particular thing, like the national gender policy, and you have a section of your team who do not even believe in it. So it becomes trouble for you and it becomes setback for the campaign. And then time lost. Because again, if you are working with you have a timeline for what you want to do, you will lose that time trying to get persons to come back on board for people to trust what you are doing, right? And if you are in a community and you are being accused of trying to turn people in the community against the leadership of the community, you know automatically that your advocacy campaign is dead on arrival. Then learning, improve strategy and messaging, you know, that is why it matters. As you are carrying out your advocacy campaign, as you are interacting with people, as you are making your radio campaign, you're carrying out your rally, you interact with people, you get to find out, you get to learn new things, right? You get to understand other things that will inform the kind of advocacy messages you are developing. It informs the kind of strategy you are applying. What strategy do you think will work best? How do you get the necessary persons in power to listen to you? How do you get their attention? How do you re-strategize to make sure that these persons are being uh, involved in what you are doing? And that's, I will just divert a bit. That takes us to the issue of lobbying during advocacy. It's very uh you have to be very strategic, right? During your strategy to advocate for something because policies we all know lies with the policymakers and getting their attention sometimes will be very, very hectic. And at times you just have to go out of your way to make that happen with meeting with them. Sometimes you might, in your course of interaction and other things, come across someone who might have access to the policymaker, who might have access to the key influential persons that you want to use. And they are setting up meetings for you at a very odd hour or at a very odd place and all that. So it's all about how you plan your plans for meeting up with them, and that will inform you to re-strategize. So, for instance, you are trying to meet up with a commissioner, and in the past 6 months, you've written written letters, follow up letter, rewrite, and all that, and it's not working. And then someone comes to meet you that you know what? There is no way you are going to see this commissioner in your own day, and just wait a little, he will go back to his rural community at Bakassi Peninsula, or his grandmother is there, and he definitely visit her over the weekend and all that. You need to strategize, and if the person is going to link you up there, you have to just find a way of meeting up with that person, because in your advocacy, these are things that you cannot be static. You have to be very flexible when it comes to advocacy, and that's why monitoring and evaluation is very important. You learn along as you are carrying out your advocacy campaign. Adaptation and credibility, very important. Credibility, adaptation, all this goes hand in hand with accountability. How do you build trust with policymakers and the public? Not to be seen as, you have to always find yourself uh, in the right frame of mind, and do not be too emotional and all that. So that trust needs to be there from policymakers, that this guy is doing, this person is doing this for the best of the community, for the best of the country. Then we look at results, show what changes, you know, was achieved and how. So at the end of all your advocacy campaign, what shows you that you've been able to achieve something is your M&E. It shows you the results, where you started from and where you are now, and how far you've come. Next slide. So we also look at challenges that comes with M&E in advocacy. And I think I've mentioned some while I was speaking earlier on. Look at long time frames for policy change. It like can take you more than 20 years for some of these things to come to be. For instance, I'll cite example with Nigeria. It's been like ages. I don't think we can remember since when there have been conversations around the fuel subsidy removal. And it has been on and on and on and on and on. And suddenly one person was able to take the bold step to say he's taking off the fuel subsidy in the country. So you can imagine if this was an advocacy campaign for you in your country to say we are advocating for the removal of fuel subsidy because of XYZ. Just like I mentioned earlier on, you have to look at what are the implications. Do you think such a campaign you will be able to pull it through as a civil society organization or as an individual? Um, Certainly you need lots of resources to pull that through, and it's time consuming, right? So you have to be very strategic. You have to think deep when coming up with an advocacy campaign, to know that um it's not a 2 month thing, it's not 6 months for some. For some, you can achieve them within that period. For others, it takes longer than that. Then attribution and contribution dilemma. So when you look at attribution and contribution dilemma, is a very delicate part of advocacy campaign. So attribution, basically you thinking that um, it's as a result of my advocacy campaign that the national gender policy was passed and enacted. That would be just too ambiguous to claim, right? Because for certain policies like this have different uh, individuals at individual level, at community-based organization, civil society organization, faith-based organizations, stakeholders, state actors being involved as well. So that attribution has to be there, and that's where accountability also comes in, right? You're saying you are working with XYZ people on this, and you also admit that you have other people working with you. So it becomes challenge in measuring to say that it's in M&E, it becomes very challenging for you to ascertain that it is as a result of your intervention that these things was met, right? And then contribution. So is another part. Do you think is that a result of someone else's contribution that you are achieving this, or you feel is totally your own effort? So that is one of the challenge faced in measuring M&E during advocacy campaign intervention. Intangible results like shift in norms, influence, alliances is challenging, right? So, for instance, if you carry out a campaign in a community and you are looking at ending female genital mutilation, advocating to end female genital mutilation in a particular community, it's also very possible that these things will happen, right? But it's definitely going to take time, and also might not necessarily mean that it's your intervention that and totally puts a stop to female genital mutilation in that community. So it's also some of the challenges you look at. And while it's all like intangible results, is most times these things are not very visible for people to see, right? So it takes you time to measure to see that there's been a drop in the reports coming in about female genital mutilation from that community. Then dynamic political environment, is another challenge on its own, right? Um, uh, the advocacy campaign, a clear example I could use for this is um, challenge with resources. We all know what we are facing right now with USAID in Africa and all that. So if your advocacy campaign, for instance, was being funded by USAID and USAID is off right now, um, that is setback because that is your source of resources for this campaign. That is one. Two, it could be a very hostile space you are working in, where civil society uh, are being marginalized, if I might use that word, or being treated badly by the government of the day. So it it it's going to be challenging for you to make advocacy for certain kind of interventions to country. Next. Right. So, yeah, we look at some of the key indicators that we need to measure during our advocacy to see if the advocacy was effective or not. So, we look at the progress, the outcome, and the impact. So, for the progress, we are looking at number of policy briefs that we are able to develop. Tata, like I asked earlier on, if the national policy in Cameroon is fully being implemented or not. So, have you been able to come up with policy briefs on that? And then meetings held with the policy makers, the number of meetings, the media mentions, how many were published, and all that. Stakeholders engagement activities. These are the things you look at the progress level. How many stakeholders engagement have we conducted so far, and all that. Then at the outcome level, you are looking at the result of all these things that you've been able to do. What changes? Have there been a change? Have there been a shift um in knowledge within the stakeholders you've engaged with? Have they been able to um say, okay, let's start discussing this policy and all that? Then you look at commitment from decision makers. How committed are the stakeholders you've engaged with at the high level? Have you received any commitments? For instance, the Speaker of House, have you gotten a strong commitment from such an individual or such office and all that? Then policy proposal acceptance. Has it been accepted at that level? Behavioral change, as I mentioned earlier on in the institution, how how are they uh, um Have there been anything? If your in the advocacy campaign was on behavioral change, say for instance, the way and manner health practitioners' response to their clients, have they been changed? Before it was not in a pleasant way, and the advocacy was for the Ministry of Health to ensure that health practitioners in the government facilities are doing the needful. So have you seen, has this changed as a result of your campaign with your advocacy meetings, your engagement with the ministry leadership and all that? Have there been some changes in the way and manner they respond to their client? So monitoring and evaluation comes to play because at the beginning, this was your concern, and we have what we call baseline, and you've done that assessment to know that government health facility medical practitioners do not treat their client in the appropriate way or based on the ethics of the profession. So now you are looking at advocating to the state ministry or to the the Ministry of Health for a change in the behavioral change. It might come as a result of your advocacy. As a result of your advocacy, probably the ministry have trained their uh, health practitioners on engagement with clients and all that. And then subsequently, you are going over again to check have these changes start, are there results as a result of this, you know? So that's what you look at outcome level. Then for the impact indicators, the impact indicators here is the fact that your, for instance, the national policy, gender policy, um, the proposal was accepted, right? So that is at outcome level. At the impact level now, you are looking at the fact that it has been enacted. It's a new policy has come out of that, and that policy has been enacted. Or the implementation is being monitored now closely as against what it was before. Probably, like I mentioned in Nigeria, the school feeding program, just maybe there was no implementation team attached to it. But as a result of feedback, civil society campaigns and all that, now the state, the country is now attaching an implementation team. So to ensure that the policy is being implemented to the letter. So you also look at resource allocation changes, you know, institutional reforms as well. So these are some of the things you look at the impact level of your advocacy campaign. Next slide. So Um, I think at this point, we will also look at the common uh, monitoring and evaluation frameworks that you could use for advocacy. Let me just mention that frameworks remain the same, but content changes. So in terms of advocacy, your framework for an advocacy campaign, M&A advocacy campaign, is definitely going to be different from in terms of content, going to be different from what you have with empowerment program. So we have about 4 things here. We look at the logic model. We look at the logic model where you talk about your inputs, and it's like a flow chart. Just the way the arrow moves, that's how it's have to be. You cannot start having impact before an activity. No, it starts with your inputs. What are the things you are bringing in? What are the activities you want to do? Your input here, you look at resources. You have the available resources. You have the right platform to make use of and all that. Then you look at the activities. What are you doing for advocacy? Basically, one of the most common thing we know is rallies and all that, and then social media now, social media campaign to call for this policy and all that. Then you look at your output. What has been the result of these activities? That is the direct, immediate uh, result. That is the immediate short-term result of all your activities. Then the outcome is the intermediate, like like results of all the activities and outputs you've been able to put together. And of course, the impact comes last. Just like the example mentioned earlier on, the ignite, to see that the policy has been ignited. Then you look at your theory of change. So for theory of change, it creates a pathway for you to follow. It gives you a clearer vision of the ideas, your advocacy campaign. That's what the theory of change does. It gives you this um mental, with your theory of change, you can have the mental picture of what you set out to achieve. You can use your theory of change to design your logic framework the way you want it to be. So it also looks at assumptions. So your theory of change is looking at all these things put together. So for instance, um the national policy, gender policy, you look at, there are different methods of running your theory of change. We have the if then because method. So you could look at, if we do XYZ, then that will happen, and because this is what we intend to achieve. So your theory of change gives you a clear pathway to what you set out to achieve. Um, so for instance, if there is a national gender policy in ground, then our women and girls and persons with disability will be empowered to do farming and all that, because, the policy has provided provision for them, because again, the essence why we are looking at policy, and the essence why I want to believe CAT is pushing for youth to be involved in policy making, is that without policy, there won't be appropriate budgeting for transformation, the kind of transformation we are looking for in Africa. So if there is no policy in place, there is no budget uh, for that change that we so much desire to see in our dear continent. So it's very important that you have a clear pathway to what you set out to achieve in your theory of change. And then you also look at outcome harvesting. So this is one of the backbone of M&E: data collection, data analysis, and data dissemination. So it's about, how do you gather data? Here you look at, how do you gather information, be it qualitative, be it quantitative. Be it through qualitative. Now you talk about having focus group discussion, whether at stakeholders level, or having key informant interviews, or having interviews, or just running surveys, by observation. What have you been observing around your area and all that? Generally, this part of your framework is where you put in all the informations you need to feed into your advocacy campaign. You want to know how many women in the last couple of decades have been involved in empowerment intervention, have been involved in technology intervention and all that. And that is what you use to carry out your advocacy campaign, to present a rationale behind why you want a certain things to change or certain things to be implemented. Then you look at your most significant change, right? In your frameworks, you need to look at your most significant change. What has really changed in our campaign? What is that thing that has really changed since when we started this campaign? What is that thing that we've been able to achieve? And basically, one of the strong points you can use for this is through storytelling. Yeah, right. It's through storytelling, and that speaks volume, of your advocacy campaign and all that. So for next slide. So like I mentioned, the basic part of your M&E especially is data gathering, right? So one of the tools, I think I've talked about this already, is your key informant interview. Gather insight. The purpose for key informant interview is to gather information, views from policymakers or civil society organizations or faith-based organizations, community members. especially community members, you really need input from your community members in your advocacy because they see these things day to day, right? Then you look at focus group discussion. Why do you do focus group discussion as a tool or as a medium to which data is being gathered? Is to understand collective perception from communities. And just to say here that most times people really confuse what focus group discussions are with you see they gather women in a particular place and say we are having focus group discussion. And yes, focus group discussion has to do with you looking at a specific category of persons or identities to strike a certain conversation or to respond to certain structured questions. But the best form you can have for focus group discussion, usually you do not exceed 12 persons during your focus group discussion. That is, you have 10 participants and um, two persons, one facilitating while the other one is taking the notes. So in your focus group discussion, that is the maximum you can have. The minimum you can have is 10%, eight participants, and then two persons participating. So you look at the persons from a particular identity. You could say you want to have focus group discussion with persons from XYZ community only, and or you want to have focus group discussion with traders. Like I said earlier on, you want to move a market from point A to point B. So you look at the key traders that are in that place, select, with your random selection, of course, coming from your stakeholders mapping, identifying the key players, key persons involved in as traders within that space and have this conversation with them. So in some instances, if your focus group discussion could exceed a day with a particular set of persons, provided they are knowledgeable about the topic you are talking about. Then you also look at media tracking. So for media tracking, the purpose of this is to quantify and analyze media mentions, narratives. So in this day where we have social media, you track, you have social media tracker. Technology has made things very easy. You have social media tracker tracking each of the conversations you are having around what people are saying, analyzing it. You put up story, you look at the narrative, the perceptions of people towards this policy. For instance, the national gender policy in Cameroon puts it up on social media and gets some of the clauses inside or propose clauses inside and share and get feedback from people. It helps you to understand if what is being proposed is going to be acceptable or it's being inclusive or it's going to kick people out. Then your policy tracking metrics. You need to set up a metrics for yourself. And the purpose is to monitor movement of laws, bills, and regulations. So it does not end that you've come up with a policy, you've drafted it and all that. It doesn't end with submitting. You have to have a tracker to see when was the bill first submitted, when was the first reading in the House, has it been passed to a committee in the House for interrogation and for public hearing, is it back to the House for the second reading, has it been thrown out of the House, and why has it been thrown out of the House, is it going to the executive for uh, is it going for its final reading and has it been adopted and sent to the executive arm for for full enactment. So these are the things that you need to look at. You need to have a policy tracking metrics for yourself and all that. Then we look at outcome journals, documents real-time progress and shift. You know, I think that one is very simplified. And then surveys, polls, looking at capturing public opinion, consistency. You know, you look at public opinion about the policy, the advocacy policy you are advocating for, and also look at their constituency support, are the people, when we say constituency now, for instance, if your advocacy is for women inclusion in farming, and then your constituency, of course, is the women who wants to farm. So those are you getting their support, or do they support such a policy, or are they against such a policy, as the case may be? Next. So just a few tips for advocacy M&E. So you need to design your M&E, your monitoring and evaluation during the planning stages, not after. So for after thinking, after coming up with what policy you're advocating for or against, you need to come out with your M&E plan. All right. You need to look at what your M&E plan says and what uh measures you are taking to achieve that advocacy. So you do not come up with your M&E design after you've started your advocacy. And it's not even possible because you need to identify, while you're identifying the issues during your advocacy design, as you're identifying the issues, providing the solutions, your M&E side by side. Okay, these are the issues. What do we need to do? Yeah, you start developing your M&E alongside your advocacy plan. Excuse me. Then use mixed methods. You know, do not rely on only one method of data collection during your advocacy campaign. Do not rely on only quantitative. Use both quantitative and qualitative. Very, very important. Then document informal wins. Yeah, like I mentioned, in the case of a lawmaker or someone you want to meet, not being in Yaoundé and is moving to Bakassi Peninsula, it's about your relationship that you'll be able to get such information. If you do not have a good relationship, if you do not build good network along the line, you will not have such information. And so you need to document such informal wins of how we were able to meet with this person through this person, and it's aid all our efforts. So narratives and access needs to be documented so that you are able to, always go back to those persons. Then, sorry, can you move on the slide? All right, thank you. So focus on contribution, not attribution. Earlier on, I mentioned during the challenges of M&E in advocacy. So do not focus more on the attribution. Do not want to take self-glory. Do not want to say, yes, it's as a result of IWI, for instance, that the Kaduna State have, ignited the violence against persons prohibition law. No, you focus on contribution, appreciate every effort from every other quarter. Even if you are the organization that is championing it, recognize the little efforts from every other persons around, So you focus more on contribution, not attribution. And then regularly review and adapt strategies, right? And that is monitoring. That is monitoring, basically. You regularly review and adapt strategies. So you have to be very flexible. And just to mention, and it's something I needed to state earlier on, for anything you are doing, your M&E is the backbone of anything you are doing, because it's the M&E that gives you the knowledge about the resources you need. Because if M&E is saying you need like 10 advocacy visits, that informs your budget line. it informs your resources, and it informs your programming, your program design. So it's very, very important that your advocacy intervention for policy, your M&E framework is solid. Because if you do not get it right with your M&E framework, identifying the key things you need to identify on your M&E framework, you definitely won't be able to achieve your goal of the advocacy thing. Next slide. Thank you very much. And at this point, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Oh, that's so much robust, exceptional, and enlightening. Uh, this session has refreshing and, of course, added to my understanding of monitoring and evaluation. And the bottom line here is impact uh, and inclusion. Talking about during M&E, always ensuring that people are carried along, always put in mind that there are people that are having disability or people that are having knowledge or language barrier or communication gap or whatever. So uh, bringing on M&E experience into your advocacy and into your campaign or whatever actually shapes your understanding of your project or advocacy, and also help you to build more like a roadmap for yourself in trying to implement whatever policy or advocacy you are trying to implement. I remember during the start of this webinar, I told you that these topics are interconnected, linked to each other. We started with understanding power dynamics and mapping. Then we go to understanding leveraging digital media tools for effective advocacy. And then we went to understanding the issues in African various continents and I mean various regions and countries. And then we further moved to coalition building, whereby there are certain advocacies that you cannot drive alone. You need to form a network or you need to carry other people along. So and now we are talking about monitoring. Now that you have all this knowledge, you are in the right course to start advocating for policy change and implement your various campaigns. So we were supposed to end this webinar 15, more like 15 minutes or so ago, but then, the knowledge you are getting from this webinar is something that will help us in the course of our activities and shapes our various experience and build on our profile. So it's a good thing that we're here right now, and we will just take a few questions, go to the poll, and we'll round up in the next few minutes. So apologies for going a little behind time. We are closing very fast. So quickly, questions. Tata is raising her hands. So mainly if you're with us, we have questions from Tata, and if you cannot unmute yourself to ask your question, you can simply drop your question in the chat box. So Tata, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ladan. Thank you very much for the presentation, sir. It was really insightful. I have two questions for you. How do you ensure that data is reliable and valid for decision making? Also, are there some software or technologies that we use that can facilitate monitoring and evaluation and reporting? Thank you.
All right.
Anybody? Oh,
All right. Thank you, Tata, for the question. So again, how do you ensure that data is reliable? So, when it comes to using data, we have primary source of data and secondary source of data. So basically for your secondary source of data, there are data that you did not um gather it yourself, or rather they are available on either journals or um different platform on the internet, like agencies, reports, and all that. So these are secondary data. And that's why when you are picking secondary data, you have to give credit to the source, just like the monitoring and evaluation definition, and I give credit to UN Women because they have done their own work and have gathered that data. So if you are getting such data from, for instance, UN Women on number of intimate partner violence, for instance, you need to cite where you are getting it from. So it's that's secondary source of data, and you look at reputable organizations where you get these informations from. You could also get your information from news, like media platform, media houses, and all that, or a research paper by someone else. That's for secondary data, and you cite where you are getting it from. So, as far as we are concerned for secondary data, that proves its reliability. Then for your primary data, which is data you conduct yourself, you go to the field either as the person or as an organization through surveillance, and sorry, I said surveillance, through questionnaire and interviews and all that. So for reliability of data, I will ask, in Nigeria, we have what we call the Research Ethic Committee, National Health Research Ethic Committee. Now, it's responsible for giving approval for research works, right? And so, at state level, for instance, in Kaduna State, the Ministry of Health is responsible for that, working collaboratively with the Kaduna State Bureau of Statistics. Now, for you to be able to conduct a survey, for instance, in uh, uh, intimate partner violence, for instance, and it's something that is going to go out, you need to apply for ethical approval. Now, your ethical approval has a background of what you are doing, introduction to what you want to do, the background, your study protocol, your data size, and that is the population to which you want to conduct your survey, to the scope, the location, and all that. So it's upon this approval that you go to the field. Now that creates a basis for reliability, just for accountability now. Now for reliability of data, and it's important, like I said earlier on, that M&E forms the basis. For every intervention you need to do, you need to set out at the minimum, 5% of what you are doing to M&E, because you are monitoring consistently throughout. So for some persons, they take it as high as 10% of whatever intervention they are carrying out, because your data collection, you need to ensure that your enumerators are properly trained, they understand confidentiality of information, they understand the purpose to which this you are generating this data. They understand the ethics of what it's involved, so that it provides them with that clarity in data collection, because that's where the quality of your data comes from, the quality of your data collectors. How well trained are they? How well informed are they on what they want, what you are carrying out? And of course, we know there's always this bias in data collection, but to an extent, it's expected that one who is trained professionally to do this. And that's why it's best when you are when you are implementing your activity, you ensure you have resources for data collectors or enumerators to ensure that the right persons are being selected. And language barrier is very important. So you do not pick someone who is speaking English. to go and collect data from someone who speaks French. Because of course, even if this person has little knowledge of French, he won't be able to communicate the way someone who speaks French will communicate in French. So you get getting your data collectors, you get someone who speaks French fluently and understands French, so that you do not have issues with language barrier when collecting data. So at the end of the day, once you get all your data, you do your data analysis. If you do not have the capacity to analyze, you have to contract it out to a good data analyst and then interpret. Now, because you've had that approval, this forms a basis for reliability, and your work could be cited wherever you intend to use it. And in the case of national policy, for instance, you need to involve, you don't need to work alone in silo. Even after getting your approval, you need to involve, let me speak for Nigeria, I don't know what is obtainable in Cameroon. You need to involve your National Bureau of Statistics. They need to be carried along in your study protocol to look at the scope to which you are going to cover for data collection. Look at the kinds of questions you are putting, bearing in mind sensitivity to different context or different individuals or identity as the case may be. So you need to carry them along, and they need to be involved in what you are doing, right? They might not necessarily go to the field with you, but they need to be involved in what you are doing, so that when you are stating your information, if for instance you are saying in the past 5 years we've had over 10,000 intimate partner violence in the country, no one is going to just, even if someone is raising concern about that information, you have someone from the Bureau of Statistics who is saying, we actually did this work together. So it provides that reliability, right? I'll give you an example. For instance, I've been involved before with health facility and education. So for education, my organization, Empowering Women for Excellence Initiative, is a member of a strong network. I believe they are also present in Cameroon. It's on education, Civil Society Action Coalition for Education. And we are tracking school enrollment and retention. We are also tracking um, uh, school feeding programs as well. But then we track infrastructure as well. So there is this community we visited in Lere, sometimes around 2019. It's a community in Nigeria, and the community members were actually the ones who put up the school, who built the school. The one government provided at long time was equal to nothing. And so when we came for stakeholders validation, and we mentioned that in Korocha community, it actually this school-based management committee who built the 2 block of classrooms the children are using. Someone from the Ministry of Education stood up to challenge it, that it was not true, right? And this comes back to stakeholders engagement. Before we did that, we worked with the community leaders, and there was a representative equally from the community who stood up to say, no, what this coalition are saying is true, because of a truth they were in our community. Now, for reliability of data, you do not sit down at home to harvest data. You do not sit down at home to fill questionnaire, because if we had not been to the place and worked on ESA, of course, it's true that the community built, but we are not there. And then issues like this came up, and someone from the ministry challenged it, and there was no one to back it up that of a truth, because this is an engagement that brought persons from the community that we claimed we visited, and you did not visit that community. And the persons from the community stood up and said, no, you people did not come to our community. Where did you get this information from? You know, already it's a question mark. So any other information you are providing, no matter how authentic it is, will be treated with just that one error. So for data quality and data reliability, you have to be very accountable. And that's why if you look at the principle of M&E as listed by the UN Women, accountability comes first. You have to be very, very accountable. And that's what gives your data that reliability uh, basis. I think I've responded to your question.
I think that is really well addressed. Data is indicating. So you'll see a poll popped up on your screen. Kindly respond quickly. It's just a few seconds for where you answer like 3 questions about this particular event, which is part of what we discussed today, M&E. Will evaluate how this event is impactful and what we need to adjust in the future webinars. So while we take the poll, I'll remind you to join the Kabylon Africa Think Tank LinkedIn group. The link is in the chat box, and also visit the website to stay updated and also follow up what we've been doing and what we are currently doing regarding shaping the future of Africa as a continent and our future as a people or the African as a whole. So without wasting much time, I will invite you to the YouTube page where you can access the previous recordings of this webinar. We have for those of us that have missed the previous webinars, you can easily catch up with us before next webinar. You can catch up with us by watching the recordings and bringing yourself up to speed with whatever we are doing right here. Remember to take the poll. It's a very quick one and will take you up to 3 seconds to do that. So if you have not done that, so the link to the YouTube channel is there where you will find all those videos for the previous 4 webinars we conducted on this particular policy and advocacy. So while we are still taking the poll, we'll go over to our colleague Uche for a good photograph. So if you could turn on your video and smile for just a few seconds so that we can take a good picture, and from there we'll call it a day. All right, let's turn on our videos. Oh, now we can see our facilitator, Mendy. Thank you, Mandy, for this robust session. It was really enlightening. And of course, we really did learn a lot. So I think our videos is up. So Uche, over to you. All right. So I think we've got enough for today. The pictures is done. The topic is well addressed. And in case if you have a further question, we can pick up the conversation in our LinkedIn group, and be sure to visit our website to learn more about the Kabylon Africa think tank, and for the YCFs, we can continue this conversation in our WhatsApp groups. So I think with this, we are good, and we see you next time. You can always subscribe to our mailing list when you visit our website so that you continue getting invitations for webinars like this, and also stay updated with the LinkedIn group. So see you next time, same time next month for the same webinar on another more important and valuable topic. Have a great day, all of you.
Bye, colleagues.
Bye. Let's take the conversation to the WhatsApp group, please.